So we have to decide the cost and the benefits. And nobody seems to be able to quantify the costs. They just say, keep throwing money at it, throwing money at it, throwing money at it. And nobody can really quantify the benefits, except if we don't do it, then we're all going to die. How much do you think it will cost for us to basically bribe every American to drive an electric car?
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're diving into a Where Questions top experts about electric vehicles and government spending. The big question, stick around because this one is wild, and before we get started, hit that so you don't miss content like this. The question no one can answer. Right out of the gate, Kennedy asks the most obvious question. He goes down the line, and you can feel the tension in the room.
How many of you drive an electric car, own an electric car? Okay. You gentlemen don't?
If you mean electric by a battery electric, no. If you mean plug-in electric, yes.
Okay. Of the three folks who raised their hands, how many do you own gasoline-powered cars at all? No?
No, Senator.
No, all electric. Okay. Let me ask you all this, and please give me brief answers, because there are five of you, there's only one of me. Okay? If electric cars are so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
The upfront costs of an electric vehicle are about $10,000 higher today than they are for an equivalent internal combustion engine vehicle today, but that cost is declining substantially.
Right.
And so this is a temporary intervention to help the auto industry strategically compete in global markets and to transition as battery costs fall.
You didn't hear my admonition, okay?
Sorry.
Doc, how about if electric vehicles are so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
I think sorry, Senator, I'll step away from.
I'm sorry, I can't see the names.
Oh, it's Gross, Ms. Gross here. I'll defer to not comment on policy questions about incentives and so on. Maybe
Tell
pass
me
it
your
off to
name. I
Ms.
can't
Hinman.
see your name tag.
Gross? I can switch.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I can swivel it.
I apologize. Would you start over?
I was just going to say I'd like to defer on policy grounds not to talk about policy incentives and so on, defer over to my
Why not?
colleague here, Ms. Hinman.
You don't believe in electric cars?
Oh, totally support electric vehicles and drive 3 of them myself.
So if they're so swell, how come we're having to pay people to drive them?
So just speaking personally then, not representing my company at this point.
Sure.
Speaking personally.
Who's your company?
EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute.
Oh, okay.
And I have to be careful about policy stepping into, wading too deeply into policy as an independent leader here. But when we think about, again, I just want to ditto what Dr. Jenkins said. This is an effort to compete
Yes,
globally.
ma'am, I know all that, but how, if they're so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
Well, maybe then the quick answer for me is I didn't take advantage of incentives, but I also bought used vehicles on the market. I love it. They're wonderful to drive. And so on.
Okay.
Senator, similar for myself.
What's your name?
Maureen Hinman.
Damn.
My hair's longer in my picture, sorry.
I'm sorry. I don't even know who I'm talking to. Go ahead, Ms. Hinman.
I did want to follow up with my colleague, Ms. Gross. I purchased my first EV, fully
Yes,
electric.
ma'am, but
in
if they're so
2015.
swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but we purchased our first vehicle in 2015 because it was easier to charge, cheaper to drive. It drives better, faster, smoother. There's no muck on the bottom of our garage. And frankly, when I had my first child, some of the safety features were just better.
But here's what.
Did you catch that? Instead of a straight answer, we get some say it's temporary. Others just refuse to comment. But no one gives a real number. Segment 2. Where are the electric cars? Here's a fact that'll make you think, but Kennedy points it out with this chart. Most of the country is just meh about electric cars. And why? Because they're expensive and impractical for long trips.
How many cars do we have in the United States?
280.
This lady right here. In the middle. I'm sorry. If I could see your name, I'd. wouldn't just point to you.
If I could, I'd like to defer to my colleague who
Well, I'd
has
like
better.
to hear your answer, okay?
How many calls?
How many cars are there?
295 million?
Okay, and what percentage are electric vehicles?
1.6.
Okay, hold up that chart. Here's where all electric vehicles are. California loves them. The West Coast loves them. Everybody else is kind of lukewarm. Okay, I'm trying to understand why. But let me move on to this. Let me ask these two gentlemen. I think the reason is because they're more expensive, and people when they drive a car like it to run, and when it runs out of electricity, it stops, and they can't find a place to charge. So let me ask these two gentlemen. I don't want to be unfair. So it's clear we got a long way to go. We got 283 million cars in America, and we got 3.3 million electric vehicles. We got a long way to go. And at least these three folks think that we need to take taxpayer money and give enough money to American people so they'll walk away from gas cars and drive electric vehicles. How much is that going to cost? I'm going to ask them in a second if I have time. But how much do you think it will cost for us to basically bribe every American to drive an electric car?
Well, Senator, excuse me, Dave Sweeter with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. I would just underscore your original question with this. There's really two things at play as it relates to what's happening.
How much money do you think it'll cost?
All right, so how much is this transition costing American taxpayers? But wait, it gets worse. Kennedy pushes for an answer. Guess what? The experts literally have no clue.
Costs are
bribe the American people enough to make them drive electric cars, to move those numbers.
Electrification's increasing as it relates to cost. Only a fraction of currently eligible
much do you
vehicles
think
are
it'll
eligible
cost?
for the federal tax credit. So
How much do you think it'll cost, David?
Senator, I think I quoted earlier
I'm
that
calling on you, sir.
Apologies.
How much do you think it'll cost?
it ultimately depends on
You
consumer
don't know,
adoption.
do you?
We don't have an exact figure.
You think
no,
we ought
Senator.
to just keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot? How about you, Mr. Davis?
Eventually, if you put enough charging stations there to solve for range anxiety, because the reason I didn't buy one is because I may have to drive 450
How
miles
much
to
do you
East
think
Tennessee
it'll
at 12
cost
moment.
the American taxpayer for us to convince the American people, frankly, bribe the American people to get rid of the gas car and drive an electric car? Can any of you give me a figure?
Yes, Senator, the Treasury Department reports we spent about $1 billion year to date. So for the first half of this year, so roughly $2 billion this
Well,
year.
we're behind.
As I noted,
How much do you think it'll cost, Doctor? You're a doctor,
so
right?
$2 billion this year is what the estimate from the Treasury
Okay,
Department.
How much do you think it will cost for us to, let's say, get 75% of these 200?
How much will it cost American consumers to remain?
How much? Do you know how much it'll cost, Doctor?
No one knows the future with certainty, Senator.
Right. You just think we ought to keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot.
I think
Is
we
that
ought to
right?
set a stable policy framework that allows American consumers to become familiar with the environment and American businesses to innovate and to compete within that stable framework. That's what I said
And how
earlier
much
in my
will that
testimony.
cost?
Will cost less than the benefits delivered by the
You don't
policy.
care how much it costs, do you?
I care if the benefits exceed the costs. I don't care about the costs.
You
These are
don't care how
investments
much
in the
it
public.
costs, do you?
I care very much how much it costs as long as the benefits exceed the costs. That's an investment worth making.
Well, so, okay.
How much
So
does it cost to seed the industries of the future to China?
I get to ask the questions, Doc.
Sorry.
You're at Princeton, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. How are Jewish students doing at Princeton? Are they feeling better?
No, that has
more
nothing to do with
comfortable?
the hearing today. I'm not going to comment on that.
I didn't think you'd want to talk about that. Do any of you have any idea how much it would cost
Senator,
to get, say, 75% of the American people
Senator,
driving electric cars?
if I could, your question is fair. One answer to it is the cost of inaction of the U.S. not competing is far greater than any incentive on the front
Okay,
end.
quantify that for me. Oh, man, I'm way over. I'm sorry, Sheldon. Quantify that for me, because here's
Once
my...
once you wrap up with this, because I think
I will.
everybody's had a chance to try to
I will.
answer your question, and
Here's
you're
my
repeating
problem.
it at this
Okay,
point.
we all want clean air. We all want bright water. We all want to eat, and we all want to live indoors. Okay? But there are trade-offs in all of this. despite what the Princeton professor thinks, we don't have unlimited money. This is not Princeton. So we have to decide the cost and the benefits. And nobody seems to be able to quantify the costs. They just say, keep throwing money at it, throwing money at it, throwing money at it. And nobody can really quantify the benefits, except if we don't do it, then we're all going to die.
China versus the US, who's winning? Here's where things get really concerning. China is spending a year on EVs, way more than the US, but guess what? Kennedy knows it and he isn't letting it slide.
And when I go back to my people and say, your electricity costs have gone up 30%, but it's for a good cause. Why, Kennedy? Because you're going to die if we don't do it. Why, Kennedy? Because a professor at Princeton says so. That doesn't work for most Americans. Can you answer that for me? You see my frustration. I love driving an electric car. I think they're really cool. But the median household income in my state's $55,000. Our Princeton professor probably makes that in a week. Okay? They don't care what they think at Princeton. Can you answer that for me, guys?
I can't answer how much it's going to cost, but I can tell you that just last year alone, China in the EV market subsidized it by $12.4 billion, and that's their annual spend. It's more than, even with in our best year, it's more than two-thirds of the United States spends.
But let me ask you a question. How much will it cost China to become carbon neutral by 2050?
I am very concerned. Well, they won't, but I'm more concerned about the risk to the U.S. economy of losing the auto manufacturing industry.
How much would it cost them? Do you know? See, nobody talks about the cost. I'll tell you how much it'll cost them. It'll cost them $1 trillion a year, starting today, to be carbon neutral by 2050. You know how much it'll cost Russia? $250 billion a year. 3 times what their defense budget. Now, if you believe that Vladimir Putin is going to spend $250 billion for climate change, then you'll never own your own home. So we go spend all this money, which y'all can't quantify. We just keep spending. They don't spend the money. They're at an advantage, and you know how much world temperatures are lowered? None. Zero, zilch, nada. And I can't believe our chairman hadn't cut me off. But I am done.
Now's your moment. Thank you, Senator Kennedy, for your enthusiastic participation in this hearing.
I just wish we had time to talk about all this. I think this is fascinating.
What does this mean for you? So here's the bottom line. Kennedy exposed the truth. What do you think? Should the government be spending billions to push electric cars? And if you want more, make sure to and turn on notifications. See you in the next one.